Beginning in 1920 and lasting until 1933, the U.S. lived under the shadow of the 18th Amendment, which prohibited the manufacturing, sale, and transportation of booze. Naturally, the inventiveness of the American spirit kept alcoholic spirits flowing the entire time. A year after the 18th Amendment and the Volstead Act, which detailed the specifics of how the amendment would be enforced, people had to start getting creative if they wanted to keep drinking. Actually, that's not entirely true. The amendment didn't stop people from drinking alcohol, just from making, selling, or transporting it. Those with enough money were able to stockpile booze for the entire year before the laws went into effect. People unable to stockpile were only able to buy alcohol if they used it for sacramental purposes, or if their doctors wrote them a prescription for it. Needless to say, rabbis and doctors became very popular. Everyone else looking to wet their whistle took to smuggling, from small-scale personal use up to large-scale operations. The go-to method was the easiest. The flask has been around since early humans started carrying water around in leather vessels. There was no simpler method of squirreling away a few sips of your favorite spirit than tucking it into a garter or jacket pocket. If the gambit worked with a few sips, why not dream a little bigger and create the thigh flask trick, like this stylish flapper back in 1928 under her floppy overcoat. Just as we'll never know how she held the flasks in place, we'll never know if she was successful. Jenny McGregor was definitely not successful when she tried to go even bigger with the bootlegger's life preserver trick. She was nabbed by federal agents in 1924. This gentleman was simply demonstrating for Detroit reporters how the booze mule trick worked. However, these vests were being modeled by cops using culprits after their smuggling attempts were thwarted. Numerous examples of failed attempts didn't deter people from trying variations on the theme. Instead of mule vests, many thirsty folks sewed pockets into their clothing, often in the lining of a jacket. Some people sported their pockets in plain sight, wearing professional aprons like those used by carpenters and factory workers. This gamble more frequently paid off for women, whom the authorities were less inclined to search thoroughly due to the social mores of the day. That's a fact that daring women were willing to exploit, going so far as to hide alcohol under a nun's habit or in a baby stroller. Hiding booze in plain sight was made even easier through the invention of the hollow cane. The hollow cane trick proved effective and popular enough that it lasts to this day. Even mainstream websites like Amazon sell modern versions of flask canes and tippling sticks. Someone looking for an even more discreet option could purchase a flask that looked like a book. Next, the famously tongue-in-cheek book flask titled Spring Poems, The Four Swallows, held 4 glass vials. Get it? The 4 swallows of booze. False bottoms were popular. People built them into bags, trunks, and pet carriers. Would-be smugglers relied on innovation to help them carry their liquor from A to B. But had they been successful, we probably wouldn't know that people tried hiding bottles in loaves of bread, or hollowed-out baseball bats, or construction materials and other professional tools of the trade. Like the man who attempted the tailor's dummy trick, only to have his papier-mâché dress form seized by the Philadelphia authorities in 1930, where they discovered 12 pints of alcohol in a secret compartment. Hopeful smugglers enlisted the animal kingdom to help them hide their hooch. Secret compartments were created in dead critters as well as prospective fauna. The egg trick was a particularly painstaking endeavor that required a person to hollow out an egg, inject it with liquor, and seal it back up. Custom agents had to be lucky enough for the person to drop an egg or for them to break one during a thorough inspection, which is what happened to one Ukrainian housewife. Her nationality gives us a clue as to the origin of the idea. Ukrainians are well known for their delicate handling of the fragile produce during their creation of decorated eggs called pysanka. When criminals weren't concealing their alcohol in animal products, they were disguising themselves as animals. The cow shoes trick was discovered in a Florida forest in 1922 when one smuggler left behind shoes with soles that looked like cow hooves. It's an idea that probably came from the Sherlock Holmes short story, The Adventures of the Priory School, where the villain fashioned his horseshoes to leave the prints of cow hooves. It must have worked because a similar trick was used after Prohibition, with World War II Dutch smugglers wearing clogs that had soles that made it look as if they were walking in the other direction. These methods of smuggling were unique, but definitely not the most effective. For a better return on the risk, you have to look at the practices of the high-level smugglers. They built hidey holes into cars and boats and organized elaborate systems of completing the task. The operation became extremely organized. The ironically sophisticated crime that cropped up in response to America's effort to crack down on crime grew beyond simple smuggling and into the realm of rum running. The pipeline from Ontario, Canada, into Michigan, known as the Windsor-Detroit Funnel, brought so much alcohol into the supposedly dry United States that the $215 million per year industry became the second largest in the state of Detroit. The multiple islands in the Detroit River made policing difficult, and any attempt made by the authorities to curtail the illegal influx was meticulously circumvented with things like speedboats. This photo, printed in a 1929 edition of the Detroit News, shows how the careful positioning of a lookout was essential to the operation. When it wasn't possible to use speedboats in the frozen river, criminals took to driving cars across the ice. They weren't always successful. Impressive as it was, all of this effort paled in comparison to what rum runners were doing under the water with torpedoes. In 1932, federal agents saw strange ripples in the Detroit River. They discovered that rum runners were filling empty torpedoes with liquor after fitting them with air compartments that allowed them to float. They then used a cable and a motorized pulley system to transport 40 cases of booze every hour into the U.S. from a Canadian boathouse a mile away. A comparable operation used World War I German U-boats to smuggle booze from Canada into New Jersey and Cape Cod. The more crime there was, the more raids the authorities needed to perform, and the more law-abiding citizens were hassled in the process. Public opinion shifted away from temperance. The onset of the Great Depression underscored the impracticality of the Prohibition era. Legal alcohol production would mean the creation of new jobs. So in 1933, the 21st Amendment repealed the 18th, ending what many referred to as America's noble experiment.